Hi guys and welcome to Essop's e-lessons. I'm Miss Essop. Today we'll be taking a look at some Matric poetry, specifically the Zulu Girl. Okay, so the Zulu Girl is by Campbell. He was a South African poet. So let's start off by looking at the title. So it starts off with the word Zulu, and we know that's an indigenous South African people, and they were best known as great warriors led by Shaka Zulu. The second word of the title is the word girl, and this refers to a young female with connotations of nurturing and such. So let's take a look at the first stanza. Hopefully you've got a copy of the poem in front of you with a pen, pencil, some highlighters so that you can add in the notes as we go along. When the sun, the red hot acres smolder. So let's take a look at the word acres. Basically means a measure of land. Right? Smolder tells us that the setting is farmland, that it's extremely hot. There's a few more references to the heat. So we see the repetition of the S sound in sun and smolder. And this is an example of alliteration, and it imitates a sizzling sound, which emphasizes the heat that the poet's trying to point out. We also see words like hot, red, and smolder, right? All references to the heat, all emphasizing how hot it is. If we look at line 2, it says, down where the sweating gang its labor plies. Now the word gang is used for a reason. It's referring to a group of people, but the word gang has negative connotations. Right, so it tells us that these people, they are collective and they have the ability to become violent. So we see that this gang, their labor plies. So this implies to us that it's forced labor. This work that they have to do, it's not by choice. They don't have much say in the matter. Right, so line 2 brings us to the idea that these are farm workers who are working in extremely harsh conditions. Right, if we look at line 3, once again we see reference to farming from the word hoe, which is a farming tool. It's used to break the surface of the ground. Right, and we see that the girl flings down her hoe, and this verb flings suggests to us that she doesn't care for this work, that she doesn't want to do it. It's not something that she's doing willingly. On to line 4, we see that she unslings her child who's tormented by the flies. So tormented tells us he's afflicted with pain or suffering. Right, and line 4 tells us that she's a mother. As much as the title might refer to a Zulu girl, telling us how young she is, we know that she is a mother and she's forced to care for her child while working. Right? There's no one else to care for her child and she has to work to provide for her child. If we move on to stanza 2, right, we see she takes him to a ring of shadow. So we see here the contrast to the heat. This shadow here is the opposite of the harsh sun that she was in, and she finds a place to comfort her child. But very interesting, the place where she chooses to comfort her child, it's surrounded or enclosed by thorn trees. Right, so thorn trees, yes, it suggests to us that this is an African context because these trees are indigenous to Africa. But there's also connotations of danger, suggesting that there are things that are dangerous to her and her child in this place. Okay, so we see the colon tells us that more information will follow as to what happens here in this shady place where she has chosen to comfort her child. Right, so line 6 goes on to say, purpled with the blood of ticks, while her sharp nails in slow caresses ruled, prowl through his hair with sharp electric clicks. So we see how she's caressing her child, right, how she's tending to him. And very interesting, we see the contrast between her sharp nails and her slow caresses. It's showing you the difference here between her ability to protect her child, but also her maternal instinct to be caring. So it's showing you two sides of this girl. There is the maternal side, the loving, nurturing one, but there's also the dangerous and protective one who will do anything for her child. So basically lines 6, 7, and 8 is describing how she's running her hands through her baby's hair and killing ticks, making sure that her child is safe from these parasites. In line 8, we see that it's described as prowling through his hair. So it's the metaphor here of her hand is compared to an animal hunting, right? Which once again suggests that she's a danger to anything that threatens her child. If we move on to stanza 3, his sleepy mouth plugged by the heavy nipple. The word plugged shows that it's a source of comfort. Her heavy nipple shows that it's providing nourishment, right, through breastfeeding. And basically, line 9 is telling us that the tired child is being breastfed. In line 10, we see he tugs like a puppy. So an interesting comparison here. It's a simile. We know that from the use of the word like. And the baby is compared to a playful puppy. So this could suggest many things. It could suggest that he's young, he's innocent, but also that he will grow stronger, that he will become fierce. And as much as he's playful now, not much of a threat, he can grow into one. We also see the word grunting, and this is an example of onomatopoeia. So the word grunting imitates the sounds of satisfaction that the baby is giving off. Okay, line 11, he's described, it says, through his frail nerves, her own deep languors ripple. So it's telling us that something's being passed on to the baby here. An interesting use of the word frail is not to say that he's weak because he'll never be strong, it's just because he's young. Right, the word languors, quite interesting, it means her emotions and her energy. So she's not only passing on nourishment to this child, but also her energy and her emotions. If we take a look at line 11 and 12, it's actually part of a simile. Through his frail nerves, her own deep languors ripple like a broad river. Right, so the flow of milk is compared to a river here. As she breastfeeds her baby, he gains nourishment, but also he absorbs her emotions. Right, line 12, very rich with figurative language. We see that the river is described as sighing, and this is an example of personification. It suggests exhaustion, but also maybe a sigh of satisfaction. If we move on to stanza 4, it says, yet in that drowsy stream, his flesh imbibes an old, unquenched, unsmotherable heat. So very interestingly, the word yet starts off this stanza. So it tells us that the content here is going to change, right? A change of focus. So the first 3 stanzas focused on describing where they were, what was happening, and now we see how that suddenly changes. The poet uses the word imbibes, right? So his flesh imbibes, so this is referring to the baby absorbing or taking in more than just milk. And in his slumber state, his body takes in more than just milk. It also, remember once again, is absorbing his mother's emotions. In line 13, we see the stream that is referenced is literally a stream of milk, but figuratively the stream of emotions from his mother. In line 14, it says an old, unquenched, unsmotherable heat. So quite an interesting word to use here to say unquenched, because that refers to thirst that is unsatisfied. And thus far, we've seen lots of imagery of streams, of rivers, right, of bodies of water. And yet the poet is saying there's an unquenched heat. Okay, so there's something, despite all of this, that's being fed to the child that is unsatisfied. So the unsmotherable heat, it's an undying passion. So he's receiving not only nourishment from his mother, but also her undying passion. And what could that undying passion be? We'll see in lines 15 and 16. The reference here is to a time when Zulus were great warriors. And it says the curbed ferocity of beaten tribes. So the word curbed tells us it's restrained. Right? And ferocity refers to a fierceness. So it tells us that these were fierce warriors who were restrained. Right? These beaten tribes, they were beaten, or rather they were defeated by colonization. In line 16, we see their sullen dignity. So sullen means sad, but dignity is almost opposing that. So it's saying even though they are sad, even though they were defeated, they are still respectable. They still hold their head high. They still have so much to be proud of. Right? So the Zulu people may have lost a war, but they are still very proud, very strong people. Okay, on to stanza 5. We see her body looms above him like a hill. Okay, so once again, a simile. So the mother's body here is compared to a hill. It provides shelter and protection for her child. And in line 18, it says, within whose shade a village lies at rest. So this is a metaphor. The sleeping child represents more than just one child. He represents all the Zulu people as they rest and they regain their strength. While he may be small now, he will grow stronger, just as the Zulu people will. Okay, so just as the mother protects and nurtures her child, we see that Africa protects and provides for her people, right, and gives them a chance to grow. Okay, line 19 refers to the first cloud. So it's telling us that there's a village lying at rest, or the first cloud so terrible and still that bears the coming harvest in its breast. So this suggests that a storm is brewing silently, not drawing attention to itself, right? And what is the coming harvest that it would bear? So this refers to not crops, but rather the people taking their power back. The word breast specifically represents how mothers nourish their children, and it tells us that the people will succeed due to their mother's hard work. right? Whether that's Mother Nature, whether that is their literal mothers, right? But their mothers have raised them, have cared for them, and it will allow them to take their power back. Okay, so a few things to think about. That this poem was written a very long time ago, but it's still very relevant today. One of the reasons it's been included into the Matric curriculum is because of its relevance. I hope you found that helpful. And if you did, please subscribe to my channel, like it, and let me know what you'd like to see more of.